Okay, good morning, almost good morning. So now all the sixth part of the 201, like the advanced bicycle series. As you understand, this subject, I mean, is very complicated, and I try not to like to stretch the boundaries of this discussion too wide, because I want to focus like on specific issues and like to, I mean, to do like a monography and maybe some other time speak about other stuff. Now, I want to. I left like the last video with the cliffhanger. So why did this like arrangement that was like natural state of affairs in the planet Venus? So why did my predecessor during the 80s he had to change it? Because it's quite like again it's kind of like it's a huge thing. You don't do it every day. Like to change, to use your power. Not to affect one person, but to change the way that actually these robots they act within like the bodies of people. This is a huge thing. So why was it done? So before we continue from this cliffhanger, I need to have. I feel that it's in order to say a few things like few notes that are important at this stage. First, my intention right now is not to give you like an outline or even a summary of the whole history of the Titan subjugation in Israel. I cannot do it in even like a series of videos. This is a too complicated issue, and I don't have like all the information. I have a lot of information, but it's not like something that you can find in an history book, and no one actually, I guess no one actually like knows like the history very well, because it's not recorded, and people and we deal with intelligence services, and they like to and especially the Israeli ones, but not only the Israeli, they like to think as the truth as something that that is fluid, and that that the stronger or the more clever like actor or agents, like in a philosophical way, they are the ones that set the truth. The truth presumably in history can change, according to their whims in a Orwellian fashion. So probably no one of them actually knows the history of this. This is like a secret history, and and all the relative people. The relevant people are like they are used to think, to always lie, and always and to think that there is no like an objective truth. They are completely deviant and cruel and sinful, and so I can't give you like a history book, or I cannot do it. I do not belong to in any like intelligence organization, and even if I would, they probably wouldn't be able to do it, because I don't think that they can do it. Actually, they have. It's obvious that that not only the Israelis but also the Americans, and to some extent the Russians, but certainly the Americans, and most certainly the Israelis, as I said in one of the previous videos, they have like remarkable difference of opinion within themselves with regards to the events that took place during the 1980s. So many of them actually, still feel like the effects of these, of these events, on their bodies. They were punished by God. And if you don't like to speak about God, no problem. Speak about the cherubs, like another civilization. They were punished by force superior to them tremendously, and more superior to them, and it cannot be like a Paleolithic civilization. So essentially, they had to either conceptualize it as punishment from God, or intervention by a third sentient species which is much more superior than the Titans and the Homo sapienses. There is no other way But presumably there is always other way, because yes, many, I mean, to this day do not, I mean, want to admit that these events happen, even though, I mean, it didn't happen long ago, and it had like, I mean, and it affected many people in Israel and abroad, many people, like many. So, and we speak about the 1980s. So, I mean, even those events are shrouded like in supposedly mystery, because these people just don't like. I mean, they like to be the ones that, I mean, set the truth, not the ones that, I mean, understand or learn about the truth. They are used to be the ones that I mean, just define the truth at their convenience. So it's so difficult to actually like stretch even like, I mean, like way like back in time before the 1980s. Even though during the 1980s it was already about like 100 years of only, I mean, and I mean, let's leave the Romans aside and the Egyptians aside. Even though, I mean, they also had like contact with Venusians, certainly so. But let's not speak about Romans and Egyptians. I mean, if you only speak about the Israeli like episode, it's during the 1980s. It was already 100 years old. So many things happened, and I cannot give you. I wish I had like this kind of like a history, but I don't have it, and it wasn't my intention to outline such a history. It's too difficult, and it's too difficult. Even though I think about it for 4 years now, but you know, I do other things as well. I also, I mean, there's not only history. There is a lot of like in my own like life that, I mean, my own life and my circumstances are, I mean, incredibly, I mean, complicated, and I'm like hunted by the government, and I'm alone. I'm like a fugitive all the time, and so, I mean, it's not like, I mean, I just I mean, I sit in a library and think about the 1980s. Like about like, you know, the time of the Nintendo the NES, and you know, the hairstyle, and you know, and the whatever, Tetris, Wonder Woman. No, I mean, my own life are full of trouble, and also, I mean, yes, I raised my daughters. I mean, after time they were with me until they were taken from me. And I've done the paintings and sculptures, so it's just too difficult, and I cannot do it. I just cannot do it, and many things that I've learned during, I mean, my journey. I mean, very important things that I've learned is that many times divinations and prophecies, they do not relate to a specific point in time, but they relate to something that, I mean, happened several times in history, like a repeated event in like different forms, and sometimes it's just something that, I mean, that it's not even an event, but it's like a characteristic of reality, or a property of reality that is only metaphorized as an event. And I've spoken about it in one of the previous videos. I hope you heard it, regarding the clone, like the clone issue. That the Israelis, I mean, send like supposedly me, but actually they send a clone. And as I've said, that this actually happened many times, and perhaps it happens right now. But it doesn't matter, because essentially every day of my life is this situation. I spoke about it in one of the previous videos. I cannot give you an entire story. In the next video, hopefully, I will speak about my life, and this also, I mean, relates to the historical issues. But what I wanted now is to speak about the bicycle mechanism. And so, what am I about to say about this bicycle mechanism, like the event that I want to describe to you now? I think that it happened during the 1980s. But I must admit to you, like, I want to be honest, like, I don't want to be like, I mean, when I don't know, not some things like when I feel that I'm not completely certain about something, I have like, I mean, I admit it, that, I mean, I just don't, I'm not sure, but I'm sure that it happened. I mean, maybe in the 1970s, maybe in 1980s. I'm not sure about like the events, because in order for me to just like, I mean, to make sense of events, I try to understand this history of the abuse of the Titans and the genocide It's like it's like it happens like in eras, you know, like many times that you know, and it's very common to actually do it. Like to say that like the fashion of the 1920s, the fashion of the 1930s, the fashion of or 10 things you missed in the 1970s from 1970s. There are all sort of like videos, you know, fads of the 20 forgotten fads of the 1980s. And it was like it's always like since like ancient times, and people want like to make sense of events, so they categorize. But like why should fashion just automatically change or fads will be actually automatically change like when the date is replaced from from the 1970s to the 1980s. So it's like it's common to artificially like separate history to generations. Like there is a book called The Last Generation, regarding the last generation of like the generation of 1914. But the concept of the book is very interesting book, because the concept of the book is not like the generation itself, but the concept of the generation. Like it describes very well how the concept of a generation was created in the minds of so many authors of the time. Like the generational concept, like the idea that is there as kind of like a thing that it's not very trivial. Even the concept of generation is not trivial at all. Like what exactly is generation? Many people today, they speak about like generation X and Y, etc., Z, whatever, post-boomers, boomers, whatever. But of course, these are all artificial, because what exactly is a generation? What defines a generation? Many times, it's something like a war. But even during the most like bloodiest and world-shattering wars, there were many people that didn't care at all about nothing. They just lived their life. Like fishermen, or I don't know, whatever they did like since forever, and just didn't care at all about the war. And it's not like during the 1960s, everyone like all over like the Western world, like when they walked in the streets, they like heard like the Beatles like in the background. Or in the 50s, they didn't like hear like Elvis. This is something that you see in the movies. But it wasn't like that, and like, it was actually that they didn't hear anything, or whatever they wanted, like, and it wasn't black and white. So what I'm trying to say is that yes, there is much artificiality in the way that I constructed my own history of the Titans, because I have no other way. I try to make sense of events, but I understand that it's a history that it's like more than 100 years, and many things happened, and probably you cannot really like you cannot really like it says it's not like episodes of that is like a sequence of episodes, because many things happened. So and any kind of like cutting this history to separate chunks is in some way artificial and done for convenience. And yes, there were, it's true that I had predecessors in Israel, more than one. And yes, I'm going to speak about the last one. It's like the one in the 1970s and 80s. This one I speak about the most. Like I speak about him for like more than a year, and like I've said many things about him, even though I don't know anything about this guy. I'm kind of like a reincarnation of him, but I don't know anything about him. Like in the personal level, I know that he suffered. He was a man of sorrow, man of constant sorrow. And the Israelis painted him like he's homosexual and pedophile, because that's what they do. They are scumbags and they do it. And he was Israeli, he was born in Israel, but I don't know how he looks. Maybe like me exactly, maybe not, I don't know. Does it matter? Not. It matters for one aspect that I spoke about it like a while ago, and I'm not sure I want to. It's. I don't want to search too much, like to cover too much, because it's too difficult. So I admit, what I'm going to describe maybe it didn't happen during the 1980s, but during the 1970s, but it doesn't really matter. Like because I want to focus on the issue of the bicycle, and this was not like in the entire history of the Titans in Israel and in this world, but on the issue of the bicycle. So this is one important remark. A second important remark is that for some time I I try to understand the nature of the Titans, of the like it was important for me to understand the nature, because I understood that they had nature, the Venusians have nature, and that I understood that much of the sins of the Israelis are related to abusing the nature in a hideous way, and also depriving them of their like natural like state of affairs, and also even like proclaiming that they don't have nature at all, or that the nature it can be set by the Homo sapiens scumbags, owners or masters, and they do it to this day. This is integral part of the scene, and they do it to this day. And like in recent times, it is supported by theories from the Western world and mostly from America regarding like fluid sexuality and transgenderism, and like it's such an obscenity to use supposedly liberal arguments in order to commit genocide and to electrocute my daughters starting the age of 2 years old and forced to torture me in any possible way. This is such a sin. But what's important for me to say is that because I was so it was so important for me to understand their nature. In a way, I overshooted the importance of their biology, and later the importance of the robots. And I don't want you to do it as well, because their nature is like Jose Ortega y Gasset, a philosopher, Spanish philosopher. He famously said that man has no nature, only history. This is not true. This is manifestly wrong. Man has nature and history, and and the state of affairs is a combination of nature and history. And it's important not to to overestimate any a biological mechanism, because what the Israelis have done throughout the years, and they still do it, it's something that I also did it to some extent, fell into this error for a short time, is that both to overestimate and to underestimate the importance of the bicycle mechanism. Like the way that the Israelis overestimated it, and this was also something that I have done, but very shortly, is to think that presumably this mechanism controls the behaviors of other creatures completely, and that's this is their modus operandi. If I go right now outside of this room, there are always people that wake up. You will, 100% that you will see. If I'm not going to take videos of it, but you will see scumbags of the Shabak. 100%. Right now, it's not a metaphor. If I go out this door of my room, you will see scumbags of the Shabak that try to control me using all sorts of mechanisms that supposedly are based on the bicycle. It doesn't. That's what they do. They are hung up on this idea completely, and it doesn't matter that it doesn't work for them. It must work. Because it's part of it became some kind of a religion. And it's similar, and this is similar to how they treat the Soviet method that I've already spoken about quite a bit. And they use it without the need to actually get any feedback, without the need to actually see results. No results are needed. They don't need results. They just continue to do the method or use the bicycle mechanism, and they don't even need to see any meaningful results in order to continue. They just continue to do it. It became a religion, just like Orthodox Judaism. That you keep doing the same rituals, and you don't expect to see any result at all. Maybe you are happy if you think that you do, but mostly you don't expect results. So this is also how we have to treat this mechanism, and this is completely wrong because the bicycle only explains some of the behavior, very small, part of their behavior, but there is also many other aspects of their behavior, and they are sentient creatures, and they have free will, and you cannot they have free will, and they should be accountable for their actions, and yes, sometimes yes you can use. I don't say that we shouldn't take this mechanism into account. Of course we should, and because it's important to take it into account. Actually, I mean, many things happened during the 80s that I'm going to speak about it. I mean, we're just going to speak about it just in a while, but and yes, of course, I mean, it should be something that you can be. This shouldn't be a secret from the public, and it should be something that you can speak about it in court. Like, one of the problems is that if you can't speak about it at all, like about the strangers and the bicycle mechanism, you cannot, like, I mean, so you can be framed for all sorts of things, I mean, because of things that you didn't really do, because, and of course, I mean, this should be like a valid line of defense, the mechanism that was used against you. And it's not, like, it's only way, like, to put you in a mental asylum. Nevertheless, it's very wrong to try to explain the entirety of the behavior by this mechanism. And I say it even though I think that I understand this mechanism much better than other people, because I've actually studied the robots like that are actually doing it, like that are taking care of it. And I think, and I have stronger connection with my connection with these robots is much stronger than any other, like, person on earth, for certain. Like, I didn't say it like that for nothing. I'm the king of the bicycles. And I can prove it to you, and I've proven it to you many times. I've proven that I can, like, just by, I mean, the symbolic command, tell the robots in my body to multiply. So, and then, I mean, and I've shown you, like, I mean, in like a test, like, that was taken from my bodily fluids, that I mean, suddenly you see tremendously more, like, robots. After, I mean, sometime after the command. And this was recorded in this channel. It's a scientific, it's not like a mythology, this is science, it's hard science. And it was done in recorder in this channel. I mean, I hope you can see it, but it should be mentioned that no evolution can do it, and certainly no human can do it. The whole, like, I mean, the Israeli culture is like, it's such a strong, like, tenet of this culture, like, to get this tea, to get the coffee. If they knew how to, like, I mean, to actually multiply it in their body, I mean, why do they resorted to cannibalism so early in the history of this Zionist, like, project, and they still like cannibalism as a way to get this tea and coffee. So, I mean, why should they, like, I mean, is it possible? I mean, it doesn't make sense that they can actually tell these robots. I don't know if they even understand that it's a robot. Maybe they don't care at all. They just think about it like an elixir that comes from the body of a dead animal or a dead robot, whatever. But if they had, like, a way to actually, like, multiply it, do you think that they could? I mean, as cool as they are, they would prefer to, like, do it in a laboratory or a factory, and not, like, to cannibalize on other, like, people. And I can multiply them outside my body as well, and it's not the same type, like the robots that I multiply outside my body or inside my body. And when I do it outside my body, there are several ways to do it, and it was demonstrated many times in this channel. When I do it outside my body, actually, or inside my body, these are not the same robots actually that they consume, because they consume a mixture of robots that, I mean, of the female robots, they call, like, the red Neos, and sometimes also the brown robots, which are the male robots, and sometimes a mixture of the two, like a soup of that is made of, like, a mixture of the two. And what I produce and multiply and, like, deal with throughout all the experiments in this channel is another type of robots that I call the yellow robots. It's not the same robot, but mine are superior to the others in tremendous way. They are, I mean, they are like it's like, I mean, a completely different entity. I mean, it's somehow related, but it can, like, one of the things that they can do is that they can act like the red robots or the brown robots or both. But it's like, I mean, it's like a small subset of what they can do actually. They can do immensely. I mean, they can create life. Like, they can open wormholes, they can close wormholes, they can do a ton of stuff. Like, I mean, and they can multiply, and they can. I mean, so why would I, like? I mean, so probably I know about these robots more than any other person on Earth currently, and I tell you that you should not overestimate their action in, like, in defining the character of a person, because the person have a character that is mostly based on, like, their education and their free will and the cultural background or lack thereof. And so this was like overestimating the power of the bicycle. It's something that the Israelis still do up to this day, and I want you not to do it. Like to still think about and to understand that we deal with consciousness creatures that have free will, like all of us. And at the same time, the Israeli also underestimated this mechanism probably because they didn't like understand like what's behind it. And I understand very well that what lies behind it is a civilization. These robots, the Neos, they are a civilization. It's a civilization of their own, like a different kind of, like a fourth civilization. They're like the Homo sapiens, they're the Venusians, the Cherubs, this my civilization, and the Neo civilization. And there is some kind of like symbiotic between the Neos and the Cherubs, but it's not the same thing. I'm not a Neo, I'm a Cherub, I'm not a Neo. The Neos are robots, like, I mean, they are small, presumably, maybe they can become very big, like, I mean, I don't know what's the size, but it's not a science video right now. I mean, I've spoken a lot about science, I cannot, like, repeat everything. There's so many hours, like, and evidence. But it's a civilization, and so what, I mean, lies behind, like, the small-time torture that the Israelis have done, and they like to play with until this day, and they've done for so many years. Actually, they didn't understand the power that they harnessed in order to commit petty, like, tortures and disgusting, you know, like, psychological tricks. And I mean, they used gods, like miniature gods, in order to subjugate poor creatures in really embarrassing ways. And they didn't understand the power that they deal with, because the power that they deal with is so much, like, I mean, superior, I mean, stronger potentially than, I mean, like, I mean, the relationship between a man and a woman, or presumably a man and a man, or whatever, like, I mean, two individuals. They have the power to annihilate civilizations, even just, I mean, mostly by, I mean, not because, I mean, they are evil, just because, but because the other civilization is too stupid to actually deal with them like little children. And that's what the Israelis are. They're little children. They never understood, and like throughout all those more than 100 years, and they don't have a shred of, like, they don't care. They don't want to know. They don't want to learn. They're stupid and ignorant. They don't understand what they're dealing with. And I've shown you in these videos what they're dealing with. It's a civilization. You mess with the civilization. They have memory. They communicate in faster than light, like information transfer. The span of, like, the communication is at least interplanetary. Who knows? Maybe more than that. You don't mess with these, like, creatures. Like, I mean, like, it's kind of like a new toy that, I mean, you are used to torture. Like, I mean, your never-ending list of targets, because the Israelis are that way. Now, one last remark before we actually speak about the subject that I wanted to speak about. Not all Venusians are the same, and not all Venusian, specifically not all Venusian females are the same. Also, not all Venusian males are the same. Regarding Venusian females, generally, the older they are and the more offspring they had, and the more, I mean, and the more sex that they had, but mostly just, I mean, with time, with age, they have more of the robots in their body. And, like, as a source of this drug, like, as a kind of, like, I mean, as a supplier of the drug, the T, I mean, they are more valuable from the Israel point of view, disgusting point of view of the Israelis. Now, some of these old ladies actually live in Earth for hundreds of years, maybe even thousands of years, in disguise. They are extremely powerful. They have extreme, like, I mean, they are like, I mean, they are like superwomen that have, like, immense power, that mostly derive from the fact that they are old. Because the Gates didn't start, like, I mean, with the Zionist project. So, and I don't know, like, who exactly who are they, and I don't know, like, who is the oldest one. They keep it. I mean, maybe they are in coalition. I mean, maybe they serve governments, and several governments know about like several of them, and they serve the governments. Maybe they don't serve any government. Maybe they speak with each other, and like and like they have their own like in kind of like a cabal, like a cabal of like like, or if you want, the coven of witches. I try not to to fall into stereotypes, but maybe they're like a cabal, like that works without the scenes. Maybe they're like a witches coven. Whatever you want to say about it, but from my understanding, usually those like old ladies, very old ladies, they not necessarily look old. They can look young, actually. They do not live like infinite, up to infinity, mostly because at some point they decide to die. They just decided they had enough. So generally they do not pass like the mark of 200 years, because they just decided they had enough. 200 or 250 years. So they just die. They decided, okay, we've had enough. Like now let's meet God or whatever they believe. But theoretically, it could be much longer than that. Theoretically, you can find like maybe 1,000 years old or even 2,000 years old, like such creature on Earth. And I don't know of any specific one, and I have no idea where they are, what they are doing, what's their agenda. Maybe their all like existence and agenda is completely orthogonal to everything that takes place in Israel. Maybe they don't care. Maybe they do care and they try to manipulate like things behind the scenes. Maybe they don't care at all. Maybe they live in kind of like maybe they're like the warlocks on Firetop Mountain. Like I don't know. But it's a possibility that actually there can be found like on Earth such creatures, and that they live for a long time, and that they passed the gates in ancient time, or long time ago, and maybe they completely they were never part of the Israeli saga, or maybe they did, I don't know, but it's a possibility. That's something that you should take into account. And I think that mostly you wouldn't find many of those, but because usually they decide that after some time, I don't just say it. I've had my own, I would say, sources like for this. Okay, I don't just invent things out of my head, as you understand. This is something that I'm saying after a long time of like investigating the issue. But generally, from what I understand, after like 200 or 250 years, they just decided that it's time to die. But maybe not all of them, and because the existence of the nanobots in their body, or the microbots or robots, of all of the above, because they come in different forms, is mostly correlated with age, even not only with age, but mostly correlated with age. They might be very powerful. They might be very powerful. Now, at the same time, it should be said that this mechanism is related to them receiving like the fluids of the male. So whoever they are, whatever age they are, they need to be in contact with the male. And it cannot be different males. So in the past, up until the 1980s, the only possible way to actually divorce is by if the male died. If the male is dead. And maybe this is what happened. You need to understand something. I have never passed any gate in my life. So for me, for most people, it sounds amazing. What kind of amazing thing it is. Probably literally out of this world, and kind of a magical thing. But I understood very quickly that for many Israelis, and presumably for people of other cultures throughout history, this wasn't a big deal, because after they've done it many times, it was just like passing the street. and it's arguably it's easier like logistically than even like short term like flight. I mean, and it requires less like a logistic effort than like the ones that are needed to in our days to maintain even like a relatively small airport. I mean, something like a bus station, or even less than that, like just passing the street. People that that had access to these gates and knew about the secrets. I mean, some of them did it like all the time. Like when it was open, there is the issue of night and day. That half of the time there is night in Venus, and it's very problematic, very problematic. But when there is light, it's for many Israelis even today. For many Israelis that live with us today, this is not a big deal at all. For them, it's not. Like going like, yes, I go to. After they're used to this interplanetary travel, they just it just becomes something. They just do it. And they built their bases like military bases over there, of course, and they have constant presence over there up until recently, of course. But so not constant because history is complicated, but during the time that they were active, that was like there were always people over there, so it wasn't like a big deal. So maybe for these ladies, it wasn't a big deal to actually from time to time to just to go there to meet their their supposedly their husband, or maybe if he's dead, like find another husband. Maybe it was like that. And maybe all those ladies that I know for a fact that they exist, they were not related to the Israeli drama. Because this story has other aspects that are not necessarily related to the Israeli drama. The tragedy is more the more proper term. What should be said is that the Israelis understood this very quickly, and they preferred these like the older ones, like because they wanted they wanted the drug, and also because they needed like the material from the males in much lower frequency. Like the older and more powerful ones, they needed to be in sexual relation or to consume to share bodily fluids with the male, and like only like once in a while, maybe I don't know, I cannot quantify it in numbers, but maybe only like once in every 50 years or so. And like and like the very young ones, maybe they need like every month or something like that. I don't know. I have the numbers. I just give you some kind of like hypothetical numbers so we would understand why the older ones are more like important from the Israeli point of view. But to take them as hostages and like to bring them to Israel. And it was always like that. Another thing that should be said that from the Israeli perspective, it was always and up to now and always extreme, like a very incredibly important like part of their agenda that they will not multiply in Israel. That the male Titans females will not multiply in Israel. This was incredibly important for them just from the beginning. It was like more than 100 years ago. As I said, maybe they fear that the Israeli people were always in kind of like a war with or conflict with many nations, like it's still the case, and maybe they thought and many Venusians crossed the gates like along the years, not like one or two, it's like a lot of people like throughout all those years. So it was like from the Israeli perspective, it was kind of like a danger that there will be like a significant population in Israel of this Venusian, which is actually the case. But moreover, they fear that they will multiply, and it will get out of control because maybe their offspring will go up not to be loyal to the Israelis, and maybe they will want to join their enemies, the enemies of the Israelis. And if there will be a war, then of course, maybe the offspring will actually choose the other side and will join the enemies of Israel. And there are always wars in Israel. So this is a valid concern. והיה אם תקרנה מלחמה, ונוסף גם הוא על צוננו, ועלה מן הארץ. As a very smart man already said before me. But again, I find myself like, again, stretching the boundaries of this discussion, because there is so much to say. But it was incredibly important from their perspective, that they will not multiply on earth. This was somewhat changed very recently in the most disgusting way. And I don't want to speak about it right now, but this is like something that was personally related to myself. Like, at some point in the last after the birth of my daughters, they decided that to use me like a farm animal in the most humiliating way. I feel like abused and humiliated just to speak about it. Like, they thought like, to create like a new project, like the new project of creating like female and maybe even male like slaves that will be like born and raised in Israel and like, of course, without my like that I even know about it, like, and while I'm treated like as an animal, and that I need to present myself like a bull, like in front of like anonymous buyers that pay money for the Shabbat, because it's all for money. Of course, it was always like that. This is so humiliating, but it's kind of new thing. Like it's a new product in the line, like in the product line of the Israelis. That the robotic product line. That for many years it contained like the robots, like the female robots, and also the drugs, the tea. So recently, very recently, they decided like to add like a new product to the product line, which is robotic babies. To sell robotic babies abroad or also in Israel. By in the most disgusting way, and I prayed God that they weren't successful, and they couldn't be successful at all. Like during the last couple of years, because as you see, I keep my sperm like in sculptures, and sometimes I destroy the sculptures, but I try not to. And I don't have any sex like with any snake that that I try to tempt me. So, and this is one of the reasons actually why I'm like a monk for a couple of years, because it's not my intention to be a part of like a eugenics program or to be like a bull that is abused all his life. This is actually new, like a development in the Israeli ingenuity of exploitation. So, having said all that, let's speak about the bicycle. And especially about an event that occurred probably during the 80s that changed the nature of the bicycle. And it was a dramatic event. And this is kind of like, it's kind of like in a way, it's also can serve like an example of how dramatic are these powers that the Israelis, and not only the Israelis, also the Americans and other people are messing with for so long. Like how careless they are. So let's go back to the end of the last video. So they lived in, so the natural state in Venus was to live in kind of like families, and that with a male king, petty king, and like one or more like females that are also serve as their like his protectors, and usually the situation was, the case of it was, the females were completely like, they treated, they saw themselves as servants of the male. Like, actually, to be honest, most of the history of humans, it was actually like exactly like that in humans, and it's still like that in many cultures. So it shouldn't be that much of like, I mean, strange to humans, because, I mean, you think whatever you want about it, but I mean, it was like that for throughout like most of the history of humans, and still it is in many places. Like the idea of like equal marriages is very new one, like in the scale of history, and it's not accepted everywhere. So, but in Venus, it wasn't equal. It was like, I mean, they saw themselves as servants of the male, and of course, I mean, the betrayal was out of the question at all. Like, I mean, sexual betrayal and also any other kind of betrayal. It's like, I mean, like a huge something, I mean, like a huge taboo. And also, it was a huge taboo for males to have like casual sex was not a thing, because as I've said, like, in order for sex to happen, I mean, the male needed like to court the female, which that mostly, I mean, many times she was actually much stronger than him, and had like the shape-shifting ability. So I mean, so we needed like to be part of this courtship, that it's like chasing her, and she needed to want it like in the first place. But there was kind of things, and after like some time, I mean, they're bonded. But it wasn't like accepted at all. Like, I mean, like for a male to bond with a female, that, I mean, like to be dishonest. Like, I mean, that, I mean, for if you see like female that shows interest, like, and then, I mean, just have sex with her and just leave her like that, like aguna, as I said, like born from the Jewish culture. Like, I mean, it is married but cannot marry, like, with no husband, and cannot marry other husband. It wasn't accepted, and it wasn't like enforced by the robots or something like that. It was just the rules of society, that, I mean, that they had society. It's not that they didn't live like as Tarzan, like in the jungle. They had society, like in the various like petty kings and round tables knew of each other, and sometimes they fighted, like, as it happened. But they knew about each other, and I mean, if someone, if a male would have done such a thing, it considered like, I mean, a terrible crime, and there was a huge change of retaliation from the other males, like, and in society. I mean, and then maybe they just, I mean, there was a huge change of them just killing the guy, and then, I mean, releasing it here from their state of aguna. So it wasn't something that was done. So there was a strong loyalty, and the females saw themselves in a way as kind of like servants of the male. Now, I understood it very long ago, but I always trying to understand what is the nature of this kind of of this arrangement. Is it something like, I mean, biological or mechanical or robotic, or something like, or maybe some kind of religion, or something like, I mean, psychological conditioning? And after some time, I came to the conclusion that I don't know the answer, and it's not incredibly important, actually. Like, it's, for certain, it's not dictated by the robots. And this is evident because what you see right now, I mean, of like a tremendous betrayal, and like, I mean, murder and abuse without end of females that are doing horrible things for a male, I mean, for so long, like for so long. So if it was dictated by the robots that they must be loyal, my own personal history wouldn't have been completely different, but it's not, because I live among snakes, disgusting snakes. And the things that they've done to me is unimaginably cruel. So no, it's not dictated by some kind of like robots. It's part of their culture, which is not, and the components of these cultures do not exist in Israel at all. Because in Israel it was completely different. They grew up since they were babies in Israel in families of snakes and lizard people that serve totalitarian, disgusting country. So no, this kind of the idea of servant is not something that is powered by the robots, but it's a strong component of their society. And it was something that was not. It was extremely difficult, for the people of Israel for the Israeli people to uproot. They tried to cancel it. They didn't like it. They didn't like this at all. And this was one of the main, I would say, problems of the Israeli Nazis since the beginning of this genocide and up until today. And throughout all these different eras, one of the main problems is that they wanted the females for certain kind of things, and this was actually changed along the years. Again, I don't want to deal with this story too much, but they wanted to enslave the female for, certain types of things that they wanted from them, and they also wanted to enslave the males for other types of things, mostly for unbelievable sexual abuse, because as I said, since the beginning, many of them, almost all of them were actually homosexuals and pedophiles. So they wanted this kind of slaves and that kind of slaves, even though, of course, most of the slaves were females all the time, because there are more females than males in Venus, even to begin with, before the genocide. But they didn't want them to have any contact with each other at all. Because, as I said, והיה תקרא מלחמה, ונוסף גמרו על צוננו, ועלה מן הארץ, as the wise man said. So, they didn't even want them to meet each other at all. But there is another issue that, they like the tea. The tea, the drug that comes from the female body, and in order for the tea to be created, they need some kind of a contact with the males. This is especially true for the younger ones that are, the more, most of them are young, because, as I said, the older ones, at some point they decided that they had enough. Generally, they don't try to live forever. So this was always kind of in a very, I say it of course in a very cynical way, but it was always kind of like a hardship, like a bug from the point of view of the humans, of the Israeli scumbags. That from their perspective, they always, it was something that they always need to deal with. How do they solve this issue? Because they wanted the female slaves, they wanted the male slaves for different reasons. At some point in time, there were no males at all. As I said, the number of Venusian males that walk on this earth right now, at least in Israel, is 0. There are no Venusian males on the land of Israel right now. There is 0. This is the situation for quite some time now. There is me that is a cherubim can act as a replacement for a Venusian male, and also do many other things that they cannot do, as I said many times. But there are no like the great white buffalo. They are nowhere to be found because they were treated in great cruelty, and I've spoken about it a lot in the past. This is part of the history in Israel, that they were, eliminated from Israel. And for some time, actually, one is coming to Israel, and they treat him like a slave, and eventually, very quickly, it dies. He's dead. Very quickly. Their lifespan in Israel is very, very short. It wasn't always like that. In the 50s and in the 40s, their lifespan was much longer in Israel, and they lived as subhumans, as perpetual slaves for the Israelis. Just, as a side note, the Americans eventually find out about it, and they didn't like it. So, so they didn't like this, that the Israelis have a subhuman class of males that live here, perpetually without rights. So together with the Israelis, they presumably enacted the new system that is still currently in place. The new system in which it's not allowed to maintain a second-class citizens or subhuman creatures that live in Israel for so long without rights and subject to so much terror. So according to the new system, whenever they arrive in Israel, they must be murdered very quickly. So because it's incredibly it doesn't fit, like, we live in a very progressive time, and it doesn't fit, like, the values of our society, like, to have, like, creatures, like, that live without rights. So it's very important, like, from the American perspective, and also in the Israeli, comply with this demand that once the male titans arrive in Israel, they do not arrive, like, randomly. The Israeli controlled the gates from both sides. And it was always like that. It was always like that. So they arrived, like, by the actions of Israelis for a reason. And they are abused here, in a very certain way. But the Israelis take care that, the abuse will be swift and will end very quickly with the murder of those titans, because the Americans made very clear that it does not fit the times, like, certainly in a democratic country. In a democratic country, that there will be the existence of subhumans, a class of subhumans in democratic in any kind of country, and certainly not in a democratic country, and certainly not in a country that almost all the military of the Israelis comes directly from the Americans. And the Americans, they had, like, for a long time, it's one of the principles of American diplomacy and, like, American international relationships, that when they give weapons to some kind of, like, a country, either for free or for money, and Israel is, like, certainly one of those countries, because they, for so long, they give them so much weapons. So it's one of, like, it's an important point in the American agenda that, if they give weapons to, or sell weapons, especially, like, highly technological weapons to a country, it's important that this country will, at least to some extent, follow the kind of, like, a series of democratic principles. They have a name for this, like, for this kind of, like, I would say, idea, or, like, a point in their agenda. And it's very important, like, not to supply weapons to countries that deviate too much from a set of basic democratic principles. And one of these principles is that, it's completely not acceptable that to have, like, a subhuman class that is tortured by society and lives perpetually without rights, like the case of the Titan males in the 50s and the 60s. So, of course, the solution that is the Israelis found, and the Americans, are totally, wholeheartedly agree with, the validity of the solution is that to murder the Titan males very quickly after they arrive, so there will not be such a class, and there is not such a class in Israel right now. And now, everyone is happy, because, the agenda, the American, like, explicit, agenda of not supplying weapons to non-democratic countries is, maintained. And, everything. The Congress, is fine with that, and, like, and, like, the president is fine with that, and everybody is happy, because we live in such a progressive time. All of this is reality. It's not like a joke or a metaphor. This is the world that you live in. Earth is not what you think it is. Earth is a cool and barbaric place. Earth is not what you think it is. It is cool and barbaric place. A cool and barbaric place. Earth right now, 2023, is a cool and barbaric place. Israel is not what you think it is. The United States is not what you think it is. These are, like, the small Satan and the big Satan, as many, like, people, like, in the Arab world used to say, but this is true. This is the small Satan and the big Satan. The whole progressive, like, mask is just a mask. They are barbarians. They are cruel. They are disgusting. And they deserve the most horrible punishment. So there was a problem for the Israelis doing, how can, at the same time they wanted the males, mostly for horrible sexual abuse, but also for other reasons that I will discuss in a bit, and they wanted the females for several reasons that were changed, like, along with time, because initially it was to have sex with them, and also to treat them as slaves, and, like, handmaids, like is like servants in their household, but also to pimp them like, to other people, and also they use them as spies. And this is a huge part of the international scandal regarding the Titans. It's still relevant to this day because they were widely used as spies, and they were used as consorts of very important people like the President of the United States, and before that to leaders in all sorts of places. Even typical, even atypical, even places that you wouldn't think about. So they were used throughout the world because to be like consorts of homosexual leaders and important people, and also as spies. So, and they are still used today, for all sorts of purposes. But they never wanted them to intermingle with each other. They wanted it to be as their connection, the point is when they meet each other will be very, they will all be controlled completely by the Shabak, and they will be as limited as possible, and if possible there will be no sexual relationship will be involved, only the sharing of the food, because in order for the cycle to happen you don't really have to conduct. It depends on how do you define sex. I would say that from the divine point of view, from the point of view of God, any kind of sharing of bodily fluid between men and female is part of it can be categorized and should be categorized as sexual relationship. But the Israelis and many humans did not see it like God, and they see it it's not as a sex, and anyway they prefer it not to have not to actually have the males and the females to never have sex, and certainly not to produce children. As I said, this was always in the Israeli agenda. So they had the problem, what do we do? How do we maintain these kind of things? And the answer to the problem actually changed along the years. It wasn't always the same answer. So again, it's a long video. I need to take a small break, but I promise I will continue very shortly from the same point. It's just that it will not be too long of video, and also just a minute so I can drink something and eat something.